to introduce now the panel of distinguished alumni of the American College of Thessaloniki, the University of Macedonia, and in the case of Kostas Nikolopoulos, also Aristotle University of Thessaloniki Law School. I will introduce the moderator, who's an old friend, as youthful as he appears. Probably when I talk about politics, I want to call Sotiri and say what's going on. In 15 minutes, we've covered everything. Great pleasure to have him back here. Sotiris has the distinction of being the valedictorian in his high school class at Anatolia. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Macedonia, a master's degree from the London School of Economics, and a PhD from University of Athens. He taught at the American College of Thessaloniki for a good number of years, and now he's currently lecturer at Democritus University of Thrace, and he will be walking us through this round table. And I think what we're going to do now is contrast what the grand theory tells us and what the practical experience of young people involved in administration, involved in business, can show us also. I'm quite pleased with what transpired previously. I had a sense of terrible depression thinking about Greek administration and the relationship between Greece and the European Union, but part of what we do at the American College of Thessaloniki at the Dukakis Center is to try to inspire young people to think that there is more than the gloom that you see on the television or that you hear on the radio, that you read in the newspaper. And if you listen to my good friend Menelos, he goes out every day and he says, I do the best I can because after all, what's the point otherwise? If we didn't have hope, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here as a teacher, you wouldn't be teaching either. So hopefully we end on a slightly brighter note and leave our young people in the audience with food for thought. And I want to remind you that we will be convening again tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. and we'll go from 11 to 3 here in the same room. And we'll be pursuing some of the issues, the issue of the cost of reform, the issue maybe of how one thinks about reform in Greece post-crisis and how the diplomatic community is reporting on what's happening in Greece. And we'll finish with a discussion of how we talk about politics, where we talk about politics, and how we bridge the gap between old people like me and young people like you. So Thierry, welcome back to Thessaloniki. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Thank you for the kind invitation. I always consider myself an active member of both the Anatolia and the ACT community. And it's a great honor and privilege to be standing in the panel where I have former students and good friends, although it's the first time that I consider myself the oldest one in this panel, even in the age of 35. Okay, I'm not going to act as a moderator to comment as a political scientist, but if I can still conceive myself as a young professional, mainly for better or for worse, I had cooperated with the Greek government for a variety of years, and after the last two panels, I raised my case on a variety of issues that were on the table. Before we move on with the main objectives of this roundtable discussion in a more structured manner, I think it'd be a great opportunity. It's a floor for young people. Back in the old days, we used to say a lot about EU's enlargement fatigue. Sometimes we discuss about conference fatigue, but I think right now all of us in this room consider ourselves young. Okay.
I'm an alumni of American College. I graduated in '98, and from 2000 and then I worked for Nestle. In 2000 to 2001, or at the end of 2001, I was transferred from Thessaloniki to Athens, and about a year now I'm back at Thessaloniki. I worked in many departments, basically the sales department. I had a small experience in the marketing department, and now I'm back in the field. And my recent business is the ice cream business, and it's the product that brings a smile, at least. And as I was saying 2 days ago with Professor Wisner, okay, I've heard there are many good things that I've heard today, but big depression. And okay, I agree with all the speakers, but I would move on with the different perspective. Is that the thing that Mr. Wilson said before? I'm trying to convince not only my team in the sales department, but also with our clients to move on, to go ahead, although we have many headwinds in front of us. And it's like we say in Greek, it's the hope dies last, and we have to move on because it's not time for tears. And Mr. Kakatsoulis said a very clever point. In my company, not my company, the company that I work for, we work in a team. Not only we should not the team, the people that I have, not me, not my director. We believe that we are a team with the clients, with the consumers also. We try to create, to avoid this feeling of depression. And when we talk out in the market, we say, please turn off the TV set. It's amazing that what we hear. We saw today some things that that have been told, and it's amazing how people get frustrated, and how people are afraid, and how people can I speak in Greek, please, for a moment? Πόσο πίσω μένουν και πόσο φοβούνται να κάνουν κίνηση. Είναι τρομακτικό αυτό που συμβαίνει. Υπάρχει κρίση τρομακτική σε όλα αυτά που βλέπουμε. Ο κόσμος φοβάται και ο φόβος είναι το χειρότερο πράγμα που μπορεί να συμβεί αυτή τη στιγμή. Αυτό που προσπαθούμε όλοι μαζί, όλοι σαν ομάδα, και το λέω και πραγματικά το πιστεύουμε κάθε μέρα και είναι πάρα πολύ δύσκολο να το κάνουμε, προσπαθούμε να συνεχίσουμε. Γιατί αν αφήσουμε τώρα και δούμε ό,τι μας συμβαίνει και μας πάρει από κάτω, τελειώσαμε. Και αυτό δεν είναι μια οτροπία την οποία τη βλέπουμε εμείς στην εταιρεία, τη βλέπουμε και σε άλλες εταιρείες και βλέπουμε ότι αυτές οι εταιρείες που ουσιαστικά τις κάνουν οι άνθρωποι συνεχίζουν και προχωρούν. Και βλέπουμε ότι υπάρχει και η ανταπόκριση από τους ανθρώπους από την αγορά. Είναι μια πολύ δύσκολη αγορά, είναι μια πολύ δύσκολη κατάσταση, αλλά το μόνο που μπορούμε να κάνουμε είναι να λειτουργήσουμε σαν ομάδα. Τίποτε άλλο. Μόνο η ομαδικότητα θα μας φέρει σε κάτι καλύτερο. Και να πω και κάτι άλλο, Mr. David, crisis is a Greek word. We invented it. Yeah. Nobody can tell us anything about crisis. Since we invented, we have the solution. It's a joke, but it's real.
My name is Kostas Nikolopoulos, and I'm an ACT alum, and I've also graduated from the law school at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. And then I did a master's at the School of Advanced International Studies. Yeah, sure, sorry. So I'm a joint alum of ACT and of Apple of the law school there, and I also have a master's from the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. And upon graduation, I've spent most of my professional career working in finance, first as an oil and gas project financier, then managing a global environmental fund, and now I just recently joined a leading London hedge fund as a partner in the energy and infrastructure division. So I guess I don't have the exposure that most people have on the everyday life in Greece, and I've been a bit cut off over the last probably 10 years, but
that's why we were invited.
Okay, good. Good. So I think there are two comments that I would like to make. The one is that I got to work with quite a few Greek companies over the the last 7 years, and I think Greece is being accused for a lot of things quite unfairly lately, and it deeply frustrates me when suddenly, while we used to be like hardworking people, smart people, efficient people, creative people, entrepreneurial people, we suddenly are being presented as the underdogs and as the lazy ones, and all these things that you hear, especially outside of Greece these days. I guess more in Germany than in London, but you still hear it there as well. And in the most honest way that I could say it, I think there's nothing different in senior and middle-level management in Greek companies compared to American or English companies. And people are as hardworking, as smart, as efficient as elsewhere. And I think that we still have some fantastic companies, and we still have some leading players in Europe. There's a financial crisis, there's a short-term liquidity crisis that these companies face, and that's why they're struggling so much. But this doesn't change the quality of the people, so I think, assuming that we can get out of that, I think there's a great future for Greece. And things will be more efficient, people will become more productive through the crisis, because everything is going towards that way. And I think the second comment that I would like to make comes from a dinner I had in London with a long-standing Korean business partner about 2 months ago, who told me that this is actually the right time to try and invest in Greece and do things in Greece, and that she recalled that during the late 90s, when Korea went through a similar situation, the whole country was reshuffled and a lot of things came up upside down, but the truth is that people who were there, who grasped opportunities at the time, are the people who are now pretty much running Asia and Southeast Asia. So there's a bright side to what is going on, and it's difficult to feel it right now. It's difficult to overcome the depression, but I think assuming we go through the next few very difficult months, I think there's great hope for Greece.
Thank you, Nikos.
Hello, I'm the brother of Nelos Demopoulos sitting right next to me. I graduated for acting at 98. I've been working I worked for Vera Lassa IVER for 2 years, and I'm currently working in one of these dark-sided companies. It's a pharmaceutical company. I worked for the last 9 years. During those years, I also made a concentrated course, lasted for a year, in sales management in Ethnico Kapodistриako. So what I would like to say is that I'm a salesman for the last 11 to 12 years. And what I also would like to add is that things are not so tough as they look from the TV sets. There are jobs out there, and if you really want to have work in Greece, you can do it. I mean, it's easy. I remember that when I had to have my first job in Greece, I sent over 80 CVs, and I finally got a job. So if you want to work in Greece, there are many jobs, there are many opportunities, and things are not so bad as we can read from newspapers or we see from TV sets.
Thank you, Nikos. Anai?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank ACT and personally Professor Wisner for inviting me here among such a distinguished set of speakers and professors earlier this day. I graduated the year 2000 in History and International Relations, and then I moved to Scotland, where I graduated from the University of Edinburgh in International Relations, and immediately after I went to Brussels, where I undertook a second master's at the Free University of Brussels, the Dutch-speaking one. I don't speak Dutch, it was an English course, in European integration and development. So being in Brussels, I thought I would spend a little bit more time there just to put into practice what I was taught all those years. Well, in reality, I ended up spending more time than I initially thought. So I undertook a couple of traineeships, one with the European Citizen Action Service, where I developed a funding guide for NGOs seeking EU funding. And then I did a traineeship, or a stage, as they call it in Brussels, in the European Commission, DG, Director General for Enlargement, specifically the unit for the pre-accession coordination of pre-accession financial instruments. And that was a great experience because it took place at a time where there was great enthusiasm for the, at the time, Eastern enlargement in 2003. Since 2003, I've been working for a Brussels-based consultancy called Schumann Associates, and today I'm a partner with a company, and basically our aim is to represent different organizations, multinational corporations, governments, and try to increase their presence in Brussels and try to work different strategies to secure EU funding for them. So trying to win EU projects for these companies. Just some general remarks and comments. I found all the presentations today very stimulating and very very interesting. Just personally, I think I hear we're lamenting all the time. You also said earlier that you're not that exposed to Greek reality. That's also true for me, even though I read all the papers and watching from the television. But I think that we're lamenting all the time about the problems that we have and what we can do to overcome them. And I believe I'm a rational person here, and it's like asking a turkey if it wants to be cooked for Christmas dinner. Nobody wants austerity measures, that's true, but over the last few decades, Greece had been on a spending spree. Not just the state, but also the citizens. We lived a life that was not real. So now we have to pay the bill, and that's difficult. So we have to do something to overcome this situation. And just maybe to connect what we're discussing with the topic of our roundtable, which is civic education and civic education reform. I think one of the fundamental values of European culture is democratic citizenship through education, and we need to bring Europe's youth closer to the institutions and the processes of democratic participation, active participation throughout Europe, and different forms of participating in civil society and civil education, if you will. So that in short, just.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. I have to thank Professor Wisner and Anatolia, of course, for inviting me here to be with you. I know today is a crazy day, and it's really good and interesting to have a conversation and talk about ideas and issues as those we are talking about right now. I graduated from the University of Macedonia in 2001. Then on, I took my master's in 2003 in the University of Wales in Aberystwyth. I worked for half a year after that for the University of Macedonia for a research project. Then on, I was a co-founder and worked for the Center for International Politics in Thessaloniki, where we were doing some research on transatlantic relationship for Greek foreign policy, EU affairs. Then on, I moved to the business market. I worked for Apple for 3 years as a education market manager. Right now, I am running an NGO called YET, the Young Entrepreneurs of Thessaloniki Group, which aims to create a network of people that have interests in innovation, entrepreneurship, business. We're trying actually to create leadership in that sense, with examples coming from Thessaloniki, small or medium or big companies that are doing really well in the Greek or even in worldwide market. And also we are having guest speakers worldwide. Last week we had a very interesting meeting at ACT with Chick-fil-A, an American company, coming here to show us and share as their values. Also, I'm running my own business right now, which is a company focusing on experience services. We are trying to create and offer special experience tourism trips in Greece. It is very difficult to do that at this time because everybody's on strike, or some cities are filled with trash, and it's not the best time to visit some places right now. But I'm sure that things will be better in the not so much distant future, and it will be a better time to do business in Greece, and also for foreign investors and companies to help in this area. I'd say one more point. I'd like to make one more point. Almost half a year ago, I had a meeting with Professor Arveler, and we were asking her, what do you make of this crisis, and what is this crisis, and what could I, or an ordinary person, do to help fight this crisis? And she said, crisis is when the old meets the new. So this is a time when new ideas and new powers in society come out and they face the old one. So stop being disappointed and stop looking down, because probably better stuff are going to win, better stuff are going to come out of this crisis. And what should you do? Just do your job right, do your thing right, and things will be better eventually. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sotiri. Hello, everybody. My name is Alexandros Koutsoukas. I've been used to saying my name in English, so it's Alexandros or Alexandros. It's more convenient for me. I'm a graduate of the University of Macedonia. I hold a BA and a master's degree from there in international relations. Then I went to Luxembourg to work for almost a year at the Luxembourg Institute for European and International Studies, and with which institute I continue a periodical relationship, a working relation. Now I'm a first year PhD student at Bristol University, and thank you, it's a way of job. Yes. And my thesis is called Why Nations Surrender When They Are Under Attack. So my experiences are mostly from the field of academia. Nevertheless, I would like to make two short points. First of all, to thank Professor Wisner and the American College of Thessaloniki for organizing this third Dukakis Symposium. And I think it is very important for the city and for the country to copy these initiatives, because it was not, for what I've heard since the morning, a monolithic symposium, but we've heard a variety of ideas, and this is what we need. As Diamandouros said at one point, we need both practical solutions as well as imagination, and we need to combine them. And having the opportunity to gather different aspects, and not just what is orthodox, correct, according to the so-called people who know the knowledge. This is the first step for something big. So thank you, and I would also like to thank my colleagues here, who are all very distinguished in their fields. So this means that our city has a lot of important people. So there is room for optimism. Nevertheless, in order to come to the first point made by Menelos, and to connect it with my experience, and I close with that, we don't just need a change of attitude. It is necessary, but how can we reach that? In Aberystwyth, they are the #1 university in the United Kingdom, according to the RAE research in the last one in 2007 or 8. Well, when I was applying there, they were having introduction talks. telling us how great they are. And they are. But after I was accepted, we had other introduction talks. And there was something that struck me hard and made the difference. Okay, guys, we're the first, but you are part of that. And if we want you to be part, if we want to continue on that track, we have to contribute. And that opens a whole story. And this is evaluation. This is what we need. Evaluation and standards. For example, from my experience, they told me a couple of things. First of all, if in the first year we're not satisfied with you, you're out. Secondly, every 2 weeks you have to meet with your supervisor. It's very strict, like school, somehow. But they keep you on track. They don't lose sight of you. They have a very strict program. But they never say we're the first and let's feel great with that. Let's feel great with that. We had Professor Cohen last week, but we have to participate in that. And then, last but not least, there comes the spirit of community. We can build community taking into consideration this thing. It's a hard process. But they tell us, we feel that you are part of the professors. We treat you, or exactly, but more or less, like you are at the same level. You can collaborate, you can talk, you can discuss, you can feel free. But you do that on a professional manner with a specific goal. You must continue on that track. So we need standards. And we need also academia to launch similar events like today's that bring people from different perspectives. Does not exclude, only includes. Thank you, and here's Stelios.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. My name is Stelios. I'm a graduate of the University of Macedonia here in Thessaloniki with a degree in international relations, as my colleagues to the left. My first master's comes from the university, from King's College, London. It's an MA in war studies. Some people, the minute they hear this, say war. I say, yeah, there's a lot to war and international relations that go together. My second master's is in political science by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the US, where I focused on transatlantic relations and migration, especially in Greece and Europe. Now I'm, since September onwards, I have the privilege of working with Dr. Wisner as his teaching and research assistant at the Michael and Kitty Dukakis Center. And one of the reasons that you asked me yesterday if I feel okay, if I'm happy with what I'm doing. Well, I think the answer comes from this today. I can't feel happier to say that the hours my eyes turned square from staring at the PC and organizing things. No, sorry, the Mac, not the PC. It didn't pay out. It did. It comes from actually seeing everybody here and the interaction that came to the floor from the speakers and the audience. Just to move on to another personal note, my experience also comes mostly from academia, but also from the non-governmental sector and the international organizations. I had the opportunity to intern for a year in Athens at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. It's an eye-opening experience because you think you are in a difficult position, but wait till you feel powerless enough to not be able to change as much as you want as a single person, as a single unit. So my NGO experience comes from Scouts, Proskopi, and the Rotaract, which is part of Rotary International, another movement. In both cases, what my experience has taught me is something that has been coming up again and again through today and especially through tonight. It's community and teamwork based on a shared sense of values. If we cannot cooperate and decide on how to go forward, which is something that we should do, the future is not there for us to grasp. So, in a sense, today's event, I think, also furthermore than indicating that Thessaloniki has something to show, is something that's put the wheels in motion. I guess that for us today, the networking that will come out, the ideas that have been exchanged, is something to begin with. It's not the end of a project. It's the beginning of an ongoing relationship between us and between our ideas. Thank you. And you have yours.
Thank you. Just a couple of short notes. This wasn't very well structured, but okay, this is one of the things that we wanted. We wanted in terms that lots of people complain that sometimes there is a massive decline in young people's traditional political participation. We wanted to show to all of you that this does not necessarily indicate a rejection of politics per se. So we would like to illustrate and ask from you if we have a transformation of forms of participation that maybe become less institutionalized, more flexible, new forms of social and political involvement, especially among young people. And this may indicate, and we can also have questions or comments from the audience, a more fundamental transformation of contemporary democracy over the years to come. At least from my point of view, and I'm not talking as a political scientist, youth participation does not come cheap anymore. It has to be won, and it has to be won as a model of a real offer to share power. Back in October 2000, I was very lucky when I started teaching at ACT, when Professor Diamandouros came for a lecture. And it was striking for me the kind of definition that he offered to the context and the meaning of what we call civil servants. Okay. So I would like to have a comment from you. How do you define this concept? In order, first of all, to understand how many civil servants do we actually have in the Hellenic Republic. Danai has made a very good comment and observation that about the civic life and about civic education. It's also one of our objectives, how to increase participation in the civic life of our communities. Professor Goldfield, in one of our American Studies seminars back in 2009, indicated that democracy doesn't work until there is a crisis. I'm mentioning this because I think you said the magic word, politics about crisis. After all, of course, no one is fully equipped to undertake such a mission. Well, today there's a crisis, okay, and this time democracy must work. So I would like to ask from you, maybe an insight, some food for thought, that how can we deal with increased participation by young people in the civic life of your communities, increased participation by young people in the system of representative democracy, open versus closed political parties. This is one of my favorite lectures in Political Science 101. And finally, how can we provide greater support for various forms of learning to participate? And this is essentially how we can a little bit think out of the box, okay? Because one of my major problems every time I was, with certain exceptions, I was collaborating with the members of the government was how difficult it was for them to think out of the box. Okay. So the floor is open for your comments or your remarks. Thank you.
Increase civic participation. I know this is a worthy goal, so I will refrain from providing magical solutions. Yes, we should do that. And one idea that is often mentioned is that if we have a good governance, then people will start participating because it would be legitimacy to the system works, so we'll participate. Nevertheless, as usual, I'm quite skeptical. If we reach this end of the good end, wouldn't people start having the opposite incentive, which comes to your point about democracy working when it's in crisis? Good governance is not democracy in crisis. So if people have a good governance, why should they bother participate? Everything is working perfectly well. So one point is that, and the other is taking a broader perspective and coming to the nice point about civic participation and the partially democratic deficit you were somehow alluded to. I don't know if this is a real problem or just a mantra repeated by us in academia or those working in the European Union. Because it's often the case that there are people with different mindsets that set the starting point of differences. Do we believe that the European Union is something that will eventually and surely become state or not?
What do you believe?
I'm agnostic. So if you take the position by many American scholars that it's something in the making but it's not going to be a federation, then you don't want more democracy. We have enough democracy. Democracy complicates things. A case in point is the referendum mentioned, proposed by our Prime Minister. You hear that, you know the reaction. This is wrong. This is unexpected. Unexpected is not dealt well by the European Union. Yes, too much democracy. So if you don't believe that we're going to become a state, we have enough democracy. We don't need more. If you think that things can reach that state, maybe yes. But this I'll leave it to the rest. So that's as an initial intervention, and who's next?
I have a question for you.
Would you like to ask a question? Okay.
Can I make a quick comment on
Yeah, sure.
It's very quick, and I know it's a bit probably over the top, but I think the way you participate has changed a lot, and I think people are turned off by probably participating in central governments and traditional forms of politics. But just, I think a very strong example is the Arab Spring pretty much started through a Facebook revolution, and it started from young people, and it's probably the biggest thing that has been going on in terms of the need for change, probably ever since the fundamental change in the world in the late 80s, early 90s. And I don't know if it's going to be a full-blown revolution or not. I don't know if it's going to change the Arab world, but it started by young people, and it started by different forms of association, of networking, and of communication. So I think young people are interested in the world, and young people are trying to make this world a better place. It's just that probably none of us is as much interested as previous generations were in the kind of very closely associated forms of governments. It's just a quick comment. That's it, basically.
Hello, I'm Daphne, a student from the American College of Thessaloniki. I have this question, like, I agree totally with you that young people want to change the world and they want, like, to be into the things, but we have, like, now this issue of immigration. Like, most young people, like, they are seeking to go elsewhere to live and to work, and how can like the government or any other public office make them or convince them to make them, like, want to stay into their country and fight for this? Like, how? So like, to fight here for the future and not elsewhere. Like, can they? Thank you.
Okay, may I add a short comment, maybe to also to give you some extra hints, especially when it comes to participation. I mean, why someone would like actually to stay here and continue under certain circumstances. The reason I ask about participation is that in the system of representative democracy, you see that, you know, political parties become smaller, they become more professionalized, they get distant from the public. One of you mentioned members of the Hellenic Parliament like Eva Kaili, like Yannis Vouros. I can refer to dozens of these, but the idea is not, you know, not to discuss about names, but about reforms that might be needed regarding issues of participation, with the aim of examining if and how we can try to bridge the gap between society, on the one hand, all of us, okay, and closed or semi-closed oligarchic systems where certain elites, independently if they are called Sotiris Serbos or David Windsor, reconcile, okay, with special and common characteristics that, amongst others, include financial resources, networking, and all this stuff. So if, for example, a citizen is happier, satisfied on how representative democracy works, maybe this also can give a reason to stay and continue and fight for it.
Then I had an answer next.
Just to comment on Daphne's question, I don't think I have a clear answer on this one, but maybe just as an advice, not just now because we have the crisis, but regardless of the crisis, I would advise any young person to try and pursue a career or an academic course abroad, because it's an eye-opening experience. And then if you come back to Greece, or you stay where you are, or you go somewhere else, it just broadens up your perspectives and makes you a more well-rounded person. So again, I wouldn't advise anyone to do contrary to that, because that's what I did, and if I turned back the hands of time, I would do exactly the same thing, again, regardless of the crisis. Maybe just to what Sotiris posed as a question, how we increase participation of young people. I've been reading in articles recently, again with the parade, the military parade, about the young people doing not very politically correct gestures to the politicians, and there were a few instances that were particularly quite offending. Everybody comments about the young population not being interested in politics anymore, and about not trusting the political state anymore. And I don't think it's just the young people. We shouldn't put labels, the young. I think it's everyone, adults or young people. Especially for the youth, we need to try to stimulate them to try and get involved in public affairs, and to notions such as intercultural learning, toleration that was mentioned earlier, solidarity. And I think the EU has given during the last few weeks and even months great lessons of solidarity, because what we as an EU try to do to save Greece is a solidarity, is a movement of solidarity, because EU came out of the ruins of wars. So that's what we're trying to achieve, to save ourselves. So just as a general.
Okay, I would like to speak half in English, half in Greek. So Greek self now speaks. Οπότε καταρχήν να απαντήσω σε αυτό που ρώτησες, τι χρειάζεται να κάνει η κυβέρνηση για να κρατήσει τον νέο κόσμο στην Ελλάδα να δουλέψει. Θα έλεγα ότι η κυβέρνηση δεν χρειάζεται να πει τίποτα. Εγώ το ζω από μια πολυεθνική εταιρεία. Αυτό που θα μπορούσε να κάνει είναι να καθίσει και να συζητήσει με τις πολυεθνικές εταιρείες, με τις εταιρείες μεγάλους ελληνικούς, πώς θα μπορέσει να υπάρξει μια συνεργασία για να γίνει και το έδαφος πιο προσοδοφόρο για να μπορέσουν και αυτές οι εταιρείες να αναπτυχθούν περαιτέρω. Ζω σε ένα κλάδο αυτή τη στιγμή, εργάζομαι σε. Το λέω ζω γιατί δουλεύω 12 με 14 ώρες την ημέρα. Εργάζομαι σε ένα κλάδο, στον φαρμακευτικό κλάδο, όπου έχω βιώσει βίαιες μειώσεις προσωπικού από αποφάσεις της κυβέρνησης, οι οποίες δεν είχαν ουσιαστικό αποτέλεσμα. Και θα σας αναφέρω ένα χαρακτηριστικό παράδειγμα. Θα κοιτάξω να μην πω ιδιαίτερα στον χώρο της δουλειάς μου. Υπήρχαν αποφάσεις για τα generics φάρμακα και πώς θα μειωθεί το φαρμακευτικό κόστος στην Ελλάδα. Παρεμπιπτόντως, θα σας κάνω μια παρένθεση. Το φαρμακευτικό κόστος στην Ελλάδα αντιπροσωπεύει maximum το 5% του συνολικού κόστους υγείας. Που σημαίνει ότι ακόμη κι αν αύριο αποφασιστεί να μην γράφεται ούτε ένα φάρμακο, δεν θα αλλάξει τίποτα στο κόστος του συστήματος υγείας. Γίνανε λοιπόν κάποιες βίαιες αλλαγές στο να μειωθεί το κόστος. Εξαιτίας αυτών των βίαιων αλλαγών υπήρξε μια μείωση περίπου 20% στο προσωπικό των πολυεθνικών, αν όχι παραπάνω, και χαρακτηριστικά θα σας αναφέρω σε ένα νοσοκομείο από αυτές τις βίαιες αλλαγές. Στο πρώτο εξάμηνο το κόστος των φαρμάκων ήταν γύρω στα 10 με 12 εκατομμύρια ευρώ. Ξέρετε λοιπόν, αφού χύθηκε τόσο πολύ αίμα, ποιο ήταν το κέρδος στο δεύτερο εξάμηνο? Από τα 10-12 εκατομμύρια ευρώ που σας αναφέρω, 3.000 ευρώ. Δηλαδή, εκεί που θέλω να καταλήξω, θα πρέπει λίγο η κυβέρνηση να συνεργαστεί με τις εταιρείες και να πάρει αποφάσεις οι οποίες να έχουν και όφελος για τις εταιρείες να μείνουν. Και όσον αφορά για το θέμα της πολιτικής και κατά πόσο οι νέοι μπαίνουν πλέον στην πολιτική, αυτό που έχω να πω είναι, μπορεί να φανεί λίγο καυστικός, λίγο υπερόπτης, αλλά αυτή τη στιγμή νιώθω ότι για ανθρώπους σαν και εμάς που αφιερώνουμε ένα μεγάλο χρόνο στη δουλειά μας και έχουμε challenges καθημερινά, αλλάζουν τον τρόπο δουλειά μας, σε ένα χρόνο μέσα αλλάζουν τον τρόπο δουλειά με 7-8 φορές, πρέπει να μου δείξει ο Υπουργός ότι μπορεί να μιλήσει μαζί μου και ότι έχει τις γνώσεις που έχω για να συνεργαστώ. Δυστυχώς αυτό το πράγμα δεν υπάρχει.
Okay.
So that was the Greek side.
You are right, but in order also to connect it with what Danai mentioned, and also picking up on a comment coming from Alexander, Danai mentioned the issue of solidarity, and like in the case of the EU, but also in the case of Greece, you know, solidarity is a two-way process. Okay, you have to give something, to offer something, in order to get something in return. Not only from 2009 onwards, but for a couple of years ago, it wasn't quite clear what Greece actually was contributing, okay, in terms of a variety of European issues outside, okay, the very strict framework of Southeastern Europe and bilateral issues. But it's also a two-way process between the citizen and the state, okay? Otherwise it becomes a vicious circle and a zero-sum game. And the reason I'm asking about your insight on representative democracy is about what Alexander mentioned when he was discussing with Professor Arbeler, that crisis is when the old meets the new. I like it. Okay, I have a very clear idea about the old. Okay, I'm still missing the new. Okay, not only in the case of Greece, but okay, let's take that in the case of Europe as well. But do you see the new coming? A, and B, do you consider yourselves part of this new, or do you have in mind how this new should be formalized? That's the idea. We all know about the old, okay? We're still digging a bit regarding the new.
The one thing that immediately comes to mind is that if we do not know the new, is because we do not know each other. People, like Danai said, you know, us young people, or them young people, if you call us old, that's what you said before. Who are we, and what do we want, and where do we want to go? One of the basic accusations that the youth has been listening to the past months or even a year is that you don't have a project. You don't have a set structure of aims and goals. You don't know what you want and where you want to go with it. Well, that's one of the parts and one of the fun parts of actually being young, I think. On the other hand, this is something that I wouldn't want to be told to participate, and I wouldn't want to be one that is dragging somebody else to participate. So if us young people want to do something to change, it has to come from us, by us. This has to do also with your question about the citizen and the state. There's something that has been brewing in my mind for some time now, through discussions with people of my age, or you know, we went to school together, to the university, is do we actually believe in a citizen-state relationship or a subject-state relationship? Because one of the drawbacks, one of the faults that have brought us to this situation of crisis today, I think, is that we were used to be treating ourselves as subjects. Somebody else is going to take care of everything, while if we want to be citizens, we actually need to take, it's something that came to mind now that we were together with Alexander in a summer conference. I remember myself saying it there also, is we need to have a stake in, have a share in what we want to do in the future. Otherwise, it's something that passes by, and we don't have the power to do it. And only if we believe in ourselves as citizens is when we will look for participation, and we will look to change things.
Let me push this argument a bit further and take the perspective from focus on EU, the world, and us in short. Well, if we want to change, then this means that we have to believe. We have to believe that there is something that will change. It doesn't have to be exactly a perfect sketch of what is going to come. Usually what's going to come is not known beforehand. But if we believe that what is going to come after our sacrifices is business as usual, then we will have the reactions by the people that are like that, because they don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. If we've only focused on Greece being the perpetrator who is wrong, who's done all the bad things, we miss the broader image and we miss the vision we want to instill in ourselves. For example, and more specifically, what is the future of social democracy in Europe? Is it a crisis or is it failed? Is it sustainable? How do we stand in the world? In a world where China is rising, other economies like Brazil, Russia, China, India rise. How are we going to withstand this rising competition? And what about capitalism as we know it so far? I'm not talking from a Marxist critique of capitalism. There are both Marxian and liberal critiques of capitalism. I'm talking about, we have a succession of crises in global capitalism. From the 80s in the States, from the late 90s in Asia, now in 2008, now still coming even stronger because of our position, our difficult position. What is wrong with our current interpretation of capitalism? Doesn't that matter? If nothing changes, then what won't happen? Then aren't we going to expect another crisis to arise? And if it's like that, why should people pay the bill? And last but not least, and mention something from Professor Krugerman, an economist who is a Nobel laureate, who wrote a few days ago at the New York Times that there is a choice, and he distinguished the choice between the choice taken by the EU and the States, who have decided to reduce spending in order to recover, but the outcome was recession, very deep in us, in Britain, something that it's not yet decided. And in comparison, he mentioned the example of Iceland. He said, okay, this is not a paradise, but the recession is different, it's less severe. There is a choice, and we must be able to discern the differences. We must be able to understand if and where we can find different policies. That's why I mentioned that this is a very important event now. I want to say something more to close it, but I forgot. So please.
I'll follow up on Delio's comment, and this will get us closer to some of the themes here. You suggest maybe something's missing in what you experience as a young person that may just keep you outside of the sphere of participation. I think that's what you were suggesting a little bit. There isn't an impetus. It's a problem we study as political scientists when we talk about political participation among young people. And that's the purpose, I think, of having this session talk about civic education. Maybe I could turn the tables a little bit and say to myself, what should the state retain from what you have to offer? Your experience as successful young people, in the case of the business people here, certainly having to reform your business practice from time to time. To say if your model's not working, you've got to reform it, right? If there's something wrong with your promotional campaign, you've got to reform it, you've got to change it, right? What lessons might political decision makers take from your own practical experience? And if you were heeded a little bit more carefully, would that enhance your own maybe desire to participate, to be a little bit more active?
Well, the answer is very easy. What states should do. I believe that governments should be able to have the guts to make some decisions in order for Greece to finally overcome the problem of the crisis. So to say, I personally, if you ask me, and sorry for my language if it's not so okay, I see many political people don't have the guts to take the decision they have to make. I am seeing decisions just to retain their positions. I don't see this to take. I haven't seen any politician taking any decision that will not be nice to the rest of the people. This is how
you've had to make.
I have to take decisions that maybe someone wouldn't like, maybe my company wouldn't like, maybe my clients wouldn't like, but I have to take it in order to go over it.
No one has ever heard from us. They just listen. They just listen. They do nothing else. This is the difference. Hear from us, not just listen. We have to say something. Each one of us is successful to his own sector. Take something from us. Ask us. Even when we go out and speak loud, we find someone else that, okay, this is the case, not saying things, leave the way it is, you don't know. Now, if I see this, which I saw before, I don't care about them. I'm just looking in my own perspective, what I will do within my small community, and that's the case. Nothing more. So I'm waiting. Okay, I'm waiting. This, how can you say this? How can we find this new thing that it will come eventually? No, we cannot give a formation to this new thing. This will happen in 4, 5, 10 years from now. Maybe at that time period we can be more sure to say that this is what we want. For now, it's abstract.
I think that Menelaos is right in terms that those with an interest in young people's political participation need both a rather critical perspective on the changing forms of participation among different groups of young people that we have discussed, but also need an appreciation of the wider social, cultural, political and economic context in which young people are living. And maybe this is one of the adiva, okay, that I'm living in an era of globalization.
It's commentary on a question, and since we're all going on with commentaries, I'll take some liberty. Part of what I've been doing in the US, working with the member of Congress that I work with, is that we've gone out to the Greek community and we've started a platform called Hellenism in the Public Service. And we use the word in the public service, because the idea is that if you go out and you raise awareness of good deeds, of volunteerism, that you, no matter what, will get the attention of opinion makers. It's very hard for someone who's running a hospital that if he's got 10 volunteers or a businessman giving some money to not pay attention to them. It's very hard that if a group of people working in a certain district here, Enoria, whatever you want to call it, goes to look at their elected official, calls them and says, the 10 of us want to meet you, and by the way, we did a fundraiser for the children's hospital. So my question to you is, you're all working in business, you're all working in an entrepreneurial environment, and quite frankly, it's very different than government. It moves at a very different speed because the measurement, the assessment is different. But what are you doing for public service? And it's not enough, and I don't mean it as to blame, I mean it as a constructive criticism. What are you doing in the concept of public service or volunteerism? Because here, when there's limited money, but you guys have a lot of talent, how are you offering that talent to the betterment of the community?
I have an example. Unfortunately, I'm going to speak about the hospitals again. I had a conversation with a hospital manager. Recently, my drug was out of the hospital due to cost reductions, and this was the case. So I would like to ask you all to answer the question I had to the center manager. This manager had to downsize the cost of drugs from 650,000 euros to 450,000 euros, 200,000 euros minus. Now, the impact of this was that many patients couldn't take the drug that they used to take for years. And this is tough. They couldn't take the drug they used to take for years. On the other side, he had to minimize the cost of the total hospital costs from 7 million to 6 million. He managed to minimize the cost from 7 million to 5 million. And he minimized the cost from 650,000 euros to 450,000 euros with a great negative impact to the patients. And I asked him one question. Okay, you're a super manager, not like this, but you're a super manager. You managed to minimize the cost 1 million more than the government asked you to do. It's okay? Okay, he says. So why don't you ask an extra budget of 200,000 euros, 300,000 euros, so that you can take that budget and buy drugs that people need? Is this something expert thinking? Well, he didn't. He didn't because he wanted to look even better, so to keep his position for the next 2 or 3 years. So we try sometimes. We speak with people, but well, this is my point of view. I don't know if it has done. I don't know if you agree with what I say. Something, please tell me so.
My point is not that. What I'm trying to make, for example,
yes.
and I don't mean to keep bringing up culture comparison, but say this month we have Thanksgiving coming up in the United States, right?
Yes.
That's November 24th. So, Ohio newspapers, meaning something that's not related to Greek, but there's a guy out there who every year opens up his restaurant and he feeds the homeless people for free. What this does, what I'm trying to get at, is it promotes an ideology among people that you have to be aware every day of what's going on. You're aware of the homeless person, you're aware of profit, and you're aware of your ability to say, I am a citizen, and you don't wait to get money from the government to start your own civil society. You just do it. And there's no one better than entrepreneurs to do that. And so it needs more than discussion, it needs action. So there are, for example, very wealthy people that will donate $5 million and their name goes on a building. That's public service. But what I'm talking about is the guy that goes to the soup kitchen, the hard stuff, and helps. And when you have unemployment reaching 20% and maybe more in this country, it's time for Greeks to come together. That will help move the ball along. People like you who are succeeding have the opportunity to give back and to help move things along.
Andreas, I agree with you that it's true that in principle youth participation is crucial to overcome apathy in the political process, but honest policy at grassroots level can do this job even better. Okay, since we are running out of time and out of audience as well, okay, maybe we can have a final comment.
I think we had one more question here.
Sorry, one more question. I'm sorry.
I changed my question so many times that I've been adapted to the dialogue because I wanted to ask it since Professor Koutselis whose speech actually was breathless for me because I like numbers, so I work with numbers. So I wanted to say the following. It's very practical. You touched the heart of the problem. You just put your finger right into it, and you did say you like surgical procedures, and I love that. And we need surgery. We need the cancer to come out of the system, so that the system, the patient can actually survive. Because no matter how much blood we get from the EU or no matter what other source, the patient will die unless we take the cancer out of it, right? And we have two beautiful examples of people helping you, to make the system healthier. And what do you say? You say that there are some people out there who actually impede you from actually clog the system. And no, it doesn't matter how many beautiful young people you have, successful and good-willing, with so much will for public service. When you have those people clogging the system, what do you do? What do you do? And you touch the heart of the problem, and I'm so frustrated with it. And I wonder, what would you do when you face that person who actually stops the papers from, going through the system? You told me a beautiful story earlier when we discussed about how much a policy would just go around, in different ministers' desks, and you need to share that story with these people here about how much you have the work that was admired and awarded by international institutions, and yet it doesn't go through the system. So how will the European Union send other experts who don't know how the system works and apply their own systems here? How will that work unless we actually face those people who clog the system with the legal realities, like Diamandouros speech was about. So that's what I want to know. You touched the problem, and I want to find out how we can do that. I know you're frustrated with it with your entire career, faced with it. I know how frustrating it is, but do you have any solution to that? I wonder. Thank you.
The point is that this panel was to discuss civic education. It's interestingly indicative that in this country, in Greece, there is no word in Greek that conveys the meaning of the word civic. So in order for all those things to happen in Greece, you must have civic education, which you don't have. And I didn't hear any suggestions of how we're going to have civic education. Thank you very much.
Because of not having have not been taught civic education, it was difficult now to actually, for every one of us to give the best or the correct, if there is one, answer. But if you draw something from everybody's experience, and I had the luck to draft everybody's bios for today. Civic education is probably the way that Alexandros went through X number of universities to find the perfect fit, that he didn't give up. So it's part of not giving up and chasing after his own dream, putting his self in the field. Vasilis, I've known him for many years also. He's opened a couple of NGOs. He runs for it. He works for it. I guess that's part of his essence of civic education, is the initiative, is creating the networks, creating the communities that will at some point initiate change. And drawing from Andreas before his question of what have you done? Well, we have done some things, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but through having the luck of belonging to a family that supports me in the dreams that I've had in helping other people, but not with the means, not write a check, or I'm not that rich, but mobilizing people around me. We, through some various organizations like Scouts and like Rotaract, we had a financial impact, let's say, of 5,000–6,000 euro in the community, which we, through our fundraising activities, we gave it to various organizations here that had the need, be it the Children's Hospital, be it the Refugee Reception Center, small and little bits of pieces. But in the end, that was something that we did. We had values of our own. 4 or 5 people that formed the nucleus in order to go forward. Maybe civic duty or civic education was instilled in us by our families or by our circle of friends. But in the end, after we finished, there was no continuation because we reached what Fotini said, that somebody was clogging the system. People weren't that enamored with our actions because they were better off staying with the status quo. That has been my experience in the new, trying to bring over the old. Well, we succeeded a bit, we failed a bit more, but in the end, our civic duty apparently will not let us stop. We will continue. That's why we are here today. That's why we want to continue our studies. That's why we want to continue our businesses. That's why something else we hope will come out of us.
Okay, thank you, Stelios. I'd like to thank all of you with a genuine interest in young people's views, all the participants. And if I have one final word, I don't have a vision as Sotiris Serpos, but I have a wish for this country. And my wish is that I would like to see many more soldiers, meaning many more citizens and servants, and less 4-star generals in this country. Thank you.
As we tried to establish yesterday, are approaching political questions in a rather different way, perhaps feeling alienated by a paradigm that's existed here for some time. I've invited a close friend of just about all of us here in Thessaloniki, rather senior and prominent journalist Kaki Bali, to moderate the session. And we have sitting with us Athan Anastasakis, whom we've met several times, a dear friend of Anatolia in the American College of Thessaloniki, Dimitris Keridis, who is a professor of international politics at University of Macedonia and the director of the Navarino Network, and a new friend to the American College, Kyriakos Dukakis, who among other things is currently a PhD candidate at St. Anthony's College, University of Oxford. We're going to go up to 3 o'clock, perhaps a little bit of a flow thereafter. We'll have to leave pretty much at 3 o'clock, but we'll try to give everyone opportunity to speak on the panel, and also those of you who continue to have questions, who want to raise points, especially for the young people. I think we're keen to hear what you have to say. So with no further ado, welcome. Kaki, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that understands Greek? So I can speak in Greek.
Well, we have headphones, huh?
No. If we need headphones, let's do it in the... So, the question is, talk to me about politics. And we are not talking about politics because at the time it doesn't exist somebody who produces politics. But the 3 scientists here have another opinion, or they think they have another opinion. So you can hear very carefully to them. and then ask the bad questions. So, are we talking about politics? Does anybody at the moment produce politics in this crisis? What kind of crisis it is, Mr. Dukakis?
So, I'm going to run through a quick presentation. I'm going to skip many slides because this is a much larger presentation. The title of the presentation is Greece Creative, Not Just Destruction. Someone here before spoke about Humanitarian creative destruction, a gentleman there. So I'm using the analogy from Schumpeter's book, but in a rather different way. I think that what's happening right now in the Greek economy through the memorandum with the IMF is significantly changing the rules of the political game in Greece. And you all know the numbers, and I'm not going to run you through them, but the situation is much larger economically than Greek, and the problems are more global. The New Deal that's going to be put through in the Greek parliament supposedly will diminish debt at the level of 120% of the GDP, and many have spoken that this is a bad thing because Greece began in the crisis with 120%. But what they don't say is that almost everyone is going to be at similar levels in 2021. Everyone is going to surpass the 100% debt to GDP ratio. And the problems of civic unrest exist all over. Youth unemployment numbers, they're problematic everywhere in the Western world. Sole exceptions Germany and Austria, which have single-digit numbers. And if we're to see the Greek problem more broadly, it's stratified. It has economics, macroeconomics and microeconomics on top. It has politics, and by politics I would define it as institutions and culture. And it also has society, and I'm going to focus on social capital. And there are creative elements in Greece. Reforms are one. I'm going to speak very, very quickly about the startup scene, social capital, and an element I'm going to call voice. And reform is the key element here. And why are reforms central? King Leopold of Belgium is considered the builder king of Belgium. He has a phenomenal domestic legacy. He had a phenomenal domestic legacy in Belgium, but in Congo, he was the most problematic ruler in the country. So institutions shape political behavior. And corruption is significant in Greece and affects institutions. The numbers are the highest in the European Union, but in the south, the corruption numbers, as you can see, are more than 20%. To give you a ballpark, those are the numbers for Estonia, Georgia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania. They're much higher. This is a book that influenced me a lot by Electra, also, The Rise and Decline of Nations, and it's pretty much the case of Greece. Mention also tried to study why institutions and nations decline, and his answer was that nations don't reform when they should. So basically, from a reform you have collective losses and you have diffuse benefits, and the politicians will never reform because all they want is to get re-elected. So the people who will have the losses are trying to capture the political system. In Greece, they did. But this is pretty much changing. Let me show you that, actually. Because revenues as a percentage of GDP were much lower in Greece compared to the European Union 27 average. Expenditure was not much higher. The Greek state has been portrayed as a very wasteful state. It's not bigger than the European Union average. In 2007, it was lower than the European Union average. But it was more wasteful. Let me show you how. Tertiary education. Expenditure in primary and secondary education as a percentage of GDP was lower for Greece compared to the European Union 27 average. The sole exception was tertiary education. But the ratio of students to teachers was much better for Greece than the EU 27 average, and for secondary and for primary education. So even though we had lower expenditures, we had more teachers. So the structure of the expenditure was problematic. And the outputs in education were much lower than the average, as you see there from the PISA scores of OECD. So my personal case, apart from being a PhD student at Oxford, I was also the chairman of Greece's Institute for Youth, which is an organization of the Ministry of Education. It's implementing EU youth programs in Greece. But the catch is that we also have two more youth organizations in the Greek government, the General Secretariat for Youth and the National Youth Foundation. And the natural question that you will have is why? It's because we have a very wasteful state. And the cumulative budget was not excessive, but the structure was problematic. So there is a new policy that there's going to be only one organization instead of three, but it's yet to be implemented. It has only been announced. I'm not going to run you through what needs to be done. By now, we pretty much know what needs to be done in the Greek state. We need to cut spending. We need to consolidate lots of public organizations. I think we should focus more on institutional reforms, namely the judicial system and the regulatory system. We have probably the most problematic judicial system in the European Union. I think that the Troika and the Greek government should focus much, much more on this versus the macroeconomic fiscal measures. But let me run you through some other creative elements that are not as much discussed. This is my favorite diagram in economics, from my studies in economics, and it's the GDP per capita in the history of the world, which was pretty much the same up until the Industrial Revolution when it ignited. So I'm going to speak about innovation in startups, and my favorite case, everyone who is trying to build a startup scene, is Israel, which is by far the best case. It has the best innovation ecosystem outside Silicon Valley. It's a country of 7.1 million people. It's surrounded, it's in a constant state of war, but it has the highest number of high-tech startups outside the US, 3,500. And it has the third highest number of companies listed in NASDAQ. Now, of course, you're going to say, how are we going to compare that to Greece, which doesn't have an entrepreneurial culture? Well, it didn't. When I was a student at the Greek Business School, Athens University of Economics and Business, back in 2001, it was impossible for a businessman to enter the university and pitch his business or her business, or it was impossible to hire people. The leftist groups in the university would never allow that. It was a taboo to connect the university with the private sector. My claim is that it's changing. This is changing slowly, but it's definitely not anymore the case. Lots of companies are entering the universities now, and the university reform is very, very good in that respect. And we had a change in society. Open Coffee, one of my favorite organizations in Greece, started in around 2007, July 18th, 2007, and this is one of their meetings. So the people who started high-tech startups, high-tech companies in Greece used to meet through the Open Coffee meetings, and lots of companies were started that way. Startup Greece was a government initiative last year which tried to basically connect all the people who are trying to do that, and it tried to inform them with regards to the European Union programs that fund entrepreneurs or provide information and infrastructure. We have a proliferation of activities, Greek startups. We have Junior Achievement Greece. I tried to fund them during my tenure. They're trying to create an entrepreneurial mentality in Greek high schools, which is very, very important. Greek mentality, we're not very much pro-business in our mentality, so this needs to change quickly. This is the site of Junior Achievement Greece. We have a proliferation of innovation competitions. This is from the Hellenic American Chamber of Commerce. This is the National Bank of Greece. We have a proliferation of workspaces in Athens. The Collab workspace is such a case. I think there is a similar workspace in Thessaloniki, which is supposed to be very good. So I'm not claiming that this is happening as quickly as it should, because we have significant tax rates, we have a problematic legal and a problematic regulatory system. So the most successful of those people who are starting companies in Athens are basically trying to create those companies also abroad. They're incorporating abroad, mainly in the United States or in Cyprus or in London. Tax rates need to be decreased for them. And I think this is going to happen because there is a base for it to happen. Now, social capital, another positive change. You probably all heard about it. The main research was about Italy, where from Rome and up we have high growth rates and high social capital. From Rome and south we don't. This was Patton's research. I love this story. A retired mafia boss recounted that when he was a young boy, his mafioso father made him climb a wall and then invited him to jump, promising to catch him. He at first refused, but his father insisted until finally he jumped and promptly landed flat on his face. The wisdom his father sought to convey was summed up by these words: you must learn to distrust even your parents. So this is South Italy, pretty much. This mentality is transfused in the centuries and in society. And Greece has low levels of social capital. In fact, it has probably among the lowest in the European Union. And look at the numbers. This was a 2001 research. Participation in associations, organizations in EU and Greece, none. 62.6 in Greece. The European Union average was lower, and Greece was much lower than the EU average. Associational membership, again, none for Greece. In 2001, trust in institutions, army, 70%, in a country which had a junta 30 years ago. Army, 70%. Justice system, 40%. Political parties, 10%. And this is before the crisis. Okay? It's getting lower. Now, Greece is a laggard in trust indicators. And the problematic state, the creation of a middle class through debt accumulation and through selective corruption in certain segments of the society, created this mess. Now, I'm not arguing that this is changing as quickly as it should, but I think that since the crisis, because the state is not capable of changing, of doing things that it used to do before, this is changing quickly. Now, Carpool GR, you all know Twitter. When we had all the strikes in Athens, there was an initiative that started from students of the National Technical University of Athens that basically said, I'm going from place A to place B. I don't know you, but you can join me in my car for free. Now, this is a social capital. This is a social capital generating situation. For Greece, this is very abnormal, and this is new. Now, Athenistas, you know them. My favorite example of social capital in Athens, you have Thessalonists here in Thessaloniki. Open tourism, people who gather to speak about tourism openly. A proliferation of TED events in Greece, much unlike other states. We have a proliferation of TED events everywhere, but this is an idea-generating event for the crisis. It's like a think tank. So again, this is very significant. So up until recently, entrepreneurship was vilified, civil society was irrelevant, trust was diminished, and now this is changing, not as quickly as we need it to change, but it's changing. So the state can do lots of things to help that. I'm not going to run you through that. The fourth thing, and I'm going to close with that, is voice. So basically, the Greek youth is changing. 70% of the Greeks who study abroad want to return to Greece, or were planning to do so basically before the crisis. And those people are change agents. From complexity studies, we know that we only need 10% of the population to have a very, very firm and unshakable belief to change mentality and change social core. I think the people the Greeks who have lived abroad and come back are basically agents of change. And what we don't know right now, we're through the fog of war, we're through the policies of the government and all these negotiations that are happening. Many people are very much desperate with the situation, but what we need to remember is that wars always end. So if we lived at 1942, 1945 was 3 years away. At some point, this will end, and this is what we need to think. And we need to underline our examples and our cases of creative change, because it is in the darkness that the stars shine the brightest. So I'm going to leave you off with that. The big bet is changing the political system. The political system is the sick man of Greece. The society is changing, and the institutions and the politicians need to account for this change. So I think and I hope that the generation of young Greeks that have returned from abroad or who through the internet are connecting with new ideas are going to be the main agents of change in a similar way as the politics changed in Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Thank you.
That was really a very good idea to compare the 90s with now. We are living in a transition now, but it's an open-end transition. I mean, the people in Eastern Europe, they knew where they wanted to go or didn't want to go. We don't.
Thank you, and I enjoyed this presentation because it was, forward-looking and also more optimistic than the rest of us. And I will finish with the same kind of tone. Only I will try and challenge this new generation idea a little bit more. But I was planning just very quickly to comment on your social capital and trust point, because we've seen this in Central and Eastern Europe and the building of democracy. But the problem is that one of the problems of what's happening right now is that you have no degree of social solidarity at all. And that is a big problem of the crisis, because you cannot overcome a crisis without having this type of solidarity which is needed. I remember reading in Tony Judd's book, and it did impress me a lot when I read it, that one of the reasons why Britain managed to overcome the crisis from the Second World War, it was because society had solidarity, and that helped a lot. So how we're going to build the trust that we need in the social capital out of this messy situation is a little bit of a puzzling thing. I will try and focus very, very briefly on what I think are the important elements of the way political leadership operates. And I'm not among the people that that agree with this kind of aggressive behavior towards politicians. On the contrary, no matter how hard we have to blame them. But there are issues about politics, which is behind, to your question, it stands as almost the independent variable there in the equation, and it sort of controls the whole process. And it defies economics in the end, because you cannot have any predictive ability in politics, and it also doesn't allow you to have any predictive ability in economics either. I have thought of, while I'm thinking of political leadership in Greece, I kind of thought of three main points. What is political leadership in Greece? What are the characteristics? The first one is that it has been weak. Political elites have been weak. I think weakness in the context of political elites in Greece is the main characteristic. This whole process of reform and resistance, that that there is always this plan to reform, but there's always resistance to it. First of all, I don't think that there's a clear-cut division in Greek society and politics who are reformers and who are not. Often, people are schizophrenic personalities. You hear them, everybody in Greece knows what exactly should be done. This is because we're in touch with Europe, this is because we get all our models and we want to emulate them. But the same person that advocates a change, it's the same person that, does the opposite thing. So it's very, very difficult to, and let me give you a few examples of politicians. Simitis, a modernizer, politician with a vision, academic, and with books on what should be done about Greece's reform process. What did he do? He was scared in front of the pension reform system. He couldn't control his party. He never managed. As a matter of fact, Simitis will be remembered as the politician of the missed opportunities. We go to Karamanlis. He was, with this rhetorical ability. He was voted because, to fight corruption. What did he do? He was scared out of any difficult situation. I remember, when there was a discussion on the Annan plan. Whether you like it or not, you just have to go and negotiate something there. What did he do? He went into the hotel room, Erdogan and Papadopoulos. Erdogan was dominating the game at the time. Karamanlis stayed in his own suite, and Papadopoulos, of course, with his intransigent attitude. Also, Karamanlis was of this kind of attitude that you just have to, let things go. We don't discuss them now, let's think about them later. Papandreou. Another interesting case of a weak and wavering politician. He knows what to do. They tell him what to do. So it's clear but he keeps on wavering. Remember the wavering between Papakonstantinou and Katseli. Shall he go that way? Will he go that way? In the meantime, the whole thing was, was running at a very fast pace. You don't need me to remind you that. The second point I want to make about politicians. We often tend to assume that these are rational actors. They think in a certain way, they have options, they have possibilities, opportunities, and they kind of calculate costs and benefits. No, this is part of the story. Politicians are also irrational actors. They are human beings, they have their own frailties, they have their own kind of traumas, their memories. Take the example of Papandreou with the referendum. Now, everybody's trying to think, why on earth did he do? Was that a rational decision? No, it wasn't. In the end, he had to rely on the old PASOK people. He remembered his father's old tricks. You remember with Papandreou and Dukakis, the very last minute, he said to Karamanlis, no for presidency, and then, of course, he introduced Dukakis without anybody. So I think there are this kind of analysis as well that we have to introduce when we think of a leader. Most leaders are not rational actors 100%. And the third point I want to make is that political elites, once they enter into Greek politics, they have to become polarized, they have to be fragmented, they have to have this party identity which is in front of anything else, even if they agree. Because if you see all these politicians talking together, they agree on the causes of the problem, they agree on what are the roots of the situation. But then, when they have to start discussing what should be done, this is when they start to get their party positions. And the problem with with Greek politics and the Greek political elites is that you don't have a critical mass of a common, understanding of what should be done. I mean, you have a forced consensus, and this before goes back to our discussion that we talked about. Nobody has to discuss exit from the euro. This is a forbidden topic. Nobody should call Macedonia Macedonia. It is a forbidden topic. I mean, the other voice is not allowed. But of course, when you talk about these issues, the whole political process becomes fragmented. So, and then we have a whole history, of course, of polarization and divisions from the Hasmon civil war and all that. Let me just finish with my question of whether we can have, a new generation. Again, we often assume that the new generation is going to be better than the old one. I tend to disagree and differ on this. Because sometimes, when I see, for instance, students who are party political, these are worse than the politicians that we see. They can become more aggressive, violent. Of course, there is also the other question that, you know, the new generation is more exposed, they can find better ways of communicating, they are more European, this, that, and the other. My main fear is that, and I recently wrote about that, the most important thing and sad thing of this crisis is that we are losing one generation. Now that generation will be the next generation of politicians. It will be a generation that is, you know, grown up in unemployment, indifferently, and, you know, struggling to get money and work. That's going to be a different generation. It could go either way. It could also go towards politicians that can be, you know, if you struggle to get a job, if you struggle to get them, you have a better kind of ethic and a better spirit. So I will finish at that because I would like to have this kind of optimistic note.
I could be even more optimistic. Because if you remember, the worst generation of politicians was the generation of the biggest heroes, the Polytechnion generation. So perhaps the new generation would be better, let's say. Politics means also to make the decision and persuade the people for the decision. And to know what the measures, every measure, is going to get, what are the sacrifices you ask for and what are the benefits you make. Is our political system thinking in these matters, or is there a new hope that somebody is going to think in this normal thing of...
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here among you this afternoon. Thank you, Kaki, and to all my co-panelists and obviously the organizers for inviting me. I will try to be very specific and concrete as an exception to the rule of having professors speak to you vaguely and elusively, because I think the time requires to be very specific and concrete with direct proposals of direct implementation and value. And you will understand what I am trying to say, and I will invite your comments because this is an idea I want to air in advance of making it more public. More widely. Why didn't we change? That was the question yesterday, and the short answer is that we didn't change, although we knew of all these pathologies that were so nicely described, because there was money around. As long as there was money around, there was no need to change. And the funny story with Israel is, just to take one of Kyriakos' point, is that Israel, for all its successes, which we all know very well, had almost a similar per capita income as Greece and a similar standards of living as Greece. So they were so successful, we were not, and yet we lived almost similarly, so why change? Now this is obviously no more the case. There is no more money around, and so we are forced to change. Now the economic side of the crisis is only the superstructure, just to remember our old dear Karl Marx. Obviously, the expression of the crisis at a certain level is the deficits, both the public deficit, the budget deficit, and the external deficit of the economy that we have been talking about so well. But the problem itself is deeply political. It has to do with the way politics was done and run in this country, and the parallel of a transition society is very useful. This is something I myself first mentioned a year and a half ago in PEV's big event in Vasiliko Theatro, that Greece is faced, the challenges that lie ahead are similar to the challenges that East Europeans had after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We are facing our own fall of the Berlin Wall, just like East Europeans 22 years ago in 1989. A whole system of government, a whole system of doing things in this country, very much connected with statism and all the pathologies of corruption, lack of meritocracy, clientelistic politics, etc., that was built the last 30 years in Metapolitevsi, and especially after 1981, I'm very specific and concrete in that, has to be dismantled if there is any chance of success. And for the society itself, this is a very dramatic process. It looks like war without victims, hopefully, I hope. But this is a post-conflict society. Will be a transition, post-conflict society facing similar huge challenges. Now everybody talks about political initiatives. Papandreou was asked to take the political initiative. The poor man, he took the wrong political initiative. Everybody talks about refreshing the political system, bringing new faces, do away with the old political class that is responsible for bringing us this disaster, make the parliament again the center of politics so that the street is not, and we don't have all the Molotov, we don't solve our problems through Molotov fighting and Molotov throwing, but instead through representations. I was just in a conference celebrating the Carmelist chair at the Thessaloniki School in Boston, asked a Greek American, very well intentioned, asked for a new Venizelos. Eleftherios Venizelos. And I reminded the guy who asked the question that Venizelos was brought to Greece by the army. And that for better or worse, the army can no longer play this political role. I am certain of that. Both theory and practice backs that up. In theory, we say that no country with a per capita income of Argentina in 1990 can have a dictatorship, and there is no case of a country below $12,000 US, 6,000 at the time, 12,000 in current value, can have a dictatorship, and Greece's per capita income is way higher than that, almost more than $30,000 US still. And no matter how much it declines, I don't think it will fall below the 12,000. So, theoretically speaking, and looking at other cases, there is no way. And plus, the Greek army, as you all know very well, having been to that, is part of a very incompetent, very ineffective state bureaucracy, incapable of even deciding the simplest things. So there is no fear of a dictatorship or an army intervention. Part of our job, especially when we're speaking in English, and especially when you speak to foreigners, is to try to explain to them Greece so that they can be helpful with Greece. And here we are faced with two main problems. A, the racism of foreigners. I mean, people who write for Bild, and for them Greeks are lazy, etc., you know all the story. But the second problem is even more real, and this is the kindness of the liberal press abroad. The liberals' misconceptions, not the racists. The liberals who think of Greece as one of them, and they try to kind of juxtapose their own experiences to Greece. For example, the most common, dictatorship is one example. That it's completely out of the Greek context, and yet for some people in the West, it presents a real danger. The riots and the way they speak of the riots shows the particularity of Greece, for example. They see the riots, they see Athens burning, and through their own very well-intentioned liberal Marxist thinking, riots are the result of economic poverty and dislocation. But we had riots before the crisis, and actually Athens burned in December 2008 in times of left-eye power, right? And other countries who have been through similar or even worse dislocation, like Latvia, Lithuania, let alone Portugal or Ireland, did not have these kind of behaviors. So riots are not necessarily a product of the economic crisis, but of a certain political culture and political system that has pre-existed the crisis and finds a way today to express even more. And this needs to be explained to foreigners if they are to be effective in the way they are to help us. We have to help them to help us. Away from the racism and away from the naivete of liberal, left-wing European politics. Both very destructive for the Greek race, although the latter is more well-intentioned. And now I come to my proposal. My proposal is very simple. When everybody speaks about new faces coming in office, doing politics, refreshing, bringing the parliament back to the center of Greek politics, this is all very vague, this is all very elusive. I was hearing George Floridis in his new initiative, and yet he didn't say anything more concrete. I will be concrete, and I will say that the only way forward is to introduce right away proportional representation. Now, I understand the fears and the risk involved And I was never a fan of proportional representation under normal circumstances to begin with. And we have the experience of '89 that was not very happy. However, if Greece is a post-conflict transition society, and the literature there is very helpful, all or most East European societies in the first election after the transition introduced and held these elections with proportional representation. So all the political forces were expressed and the people expressed their voice clearly without being blackmailed. The idea that we are going to have elections, what was the opposition leader told us, that if he doesn't get majority, he will ask for next election, and next election, and next election. Given the circumstances today and the economics, is obviously something that is completely out of the present economic context. With proportional representation, new people that we cannot think of, people that at the local level, like here in Thessaloniki, emerge, but at the local level, will emerge at the national level as well, or will have an opportunity to emerge away from the fortifications. We have fortified, close. We have political system that cannot produce. It's totally blocked, and it's a completely redesigned, needs a completely redesigned, rethinking, reconceptualization. And no matter how hard I try to think, how much I try to think, I cannot see of another way. If there are no extra constitutional ways, like the army, okay, fine. If the referenda do not work because we see the ramifications, the idea of having one more election with the same system, when one party will keep on asking for full majority, and then not knowing what to do with it, because this majority will not represent the majority of the Greek people and will not provide for broader cooperations, to me is a deadlock system with continuous elections that will lead nowhere. Now this is a proposal that can be implemented immediately, had PASOK wanted that, because the small parties would comply, and so it will get more than 200 votes in parliament and it will be effective immediately. It will provide for broader cooperations now, not tomorrow, because everybody will know that tomorrow the parliament will not be able to provide one-party rule, and so let's cooperate today instead of waiting for tomorrow. It will make the opposition, any opposition, think more carefully before asking for elections. It will make even the smaller parties more responsible because they will be asked to co-govern if need be, I think. Obviously there are dangers, and obviously one can counter argue, and I'm here to hear your voices. But for me, in this time of crisis, ultimate political crisis that we are in, with a totally bankrupt political system that we have, I think politics as usual is no more an option, and we all think to be very creative and think out of the box, and the taboo that was the proportional representation be broken. After all, the majoritarian rule brought us this political system that is totally bankrupt here. The idea that the one party needs to be rewarded with 50 seats bonus just because it took one more vote ahead completely distorts the debate, makes Greeks not want to go to vote, a lot of them, takes politics out of parliament into the street, creates a situation where the Greek people are not able to express themselves and thus disarm, not be able to disarm popular protest from violence. We need to avoid violence. We need to make Greek parliament the center of our political life again. We need to provide the institutional framework. We cannot change the culture. We cannot change the Ottoman legacy, as Diamandouros was saying yesterday, or the lack of social capital that you did will take centuries, right? But we can provide for an institutional change, and the easiest, fastest, most effective, direct way to change right away tonight is proportional representation. Everybody will know that he will need to cooperate with one another to form a government, and will make our political forces more, I hope, responsible. Thank you.
that was a fancy idea. I would like to see the political elites to cooperate. You are not even, you cannot even do it in your university to cooperate. But it would be a challenge, that's true. So, I don't want to take your time. 3 and then again and again. With the long hair, the girl, yeah.
Hi. Again, I'm Juliana Magra, and I'm still a student in high school. So I'm actually part of the generation that you referred to, and my initial plan when I decided that I want to study politics was to come back eventually after finishing my studies abroad and pass my knowledge on here. But now, me and a lot of my classmates find that we have no motive to come back in this country. Come back and do what? Have no job and not being able to find a job actually if I don't want to give money to the people that will give me the job. So even if I deserve it in this country, I don't know if I will be able to do what I will have earned through my studies. So I would like to be optimistic as you are, but I find it difficult at this stage. And I'm a student of the International Baccalaureate, so I have somehow left the Greek educational system. But while I was part of it, what I found out is that the state, as they have organized the educational system, do not want us to be critical thinkers. So how do we expect the new generation to be able to judge the decisions that are taken at this point, to be able to judge the political situation, and most importantly, since they are kids and products of this system, how do we expect them to change their mentality? Well, my classmates in the Greek system have actually told me that they want to go to university because their father will buy them a car if they go to university, and they will never step foot on the university once they have the car, and go for coffee because that's their objective for life. I know that this is not everyone, but this is the majority of the Greek students at the moment, and I'm one of them, that's why I know. So how do you change the mentality of the people that will form the society, will form the political system now, when for years and years the educational system did not want them to think critically, and having one history book, being the one state in Europe that has one history book, to me is a bit of propaganda.
Yes, there will be no more cars. The cars will no more available. That's
Can they afford to buy cars? That's the question.
Yes, that was before the crisis. Now I want to see what they will do. That they will not have the motive of the car. They will not go to university, I guess. Go just for coffee.
Coffee is not
bad. Please, very quickly.
No, we'll take another 2 and then you have the...
Dmitry, I beg to disagree with you. The discussion and the conversation that democracy has been too much. Now it's not time for more democracy, it's time for more production. If you see the countries in Latin America, all of them have a presidential system. It has worked, I know the case in Ecuador, I know the case in Peru, to elect very contrarian presidents built on indigenous communities if you want to express all hues of society. But to have another system, like the Italian current system, that can produce not 2, but only 1 prime minister, which is basically a presidential system in disguise, that's what the proportional representation will be. You will have 1 majoritarian leader instead of 2. And basically we're just going to talk ad nauseum until we don't produce anything at all.
Next, exactly.
My name is Sasha Valley. I'm with Northeastern University. My question was for Dr. Dukakis, and I'm not particularly well acquainted with the state of entrepreneurship in Greece, but I found it interesting that you mentioned Israel as a model for countries that have a successful entrepreneurship and startup sector, given their very particular and special situation. And I personally have a very strong conviction that entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship in particular are a fast track to development. So I'm curious how much common context do you really believe that Greece has with a country such as Israel? In other words, can you discuss in more detail what elements do you think are in place in Greece that that would make it a successful entrepreneurial state?
No, we'll take another two, because we don't have a lot of time. It was some, yeah.
Well, in support of Dimitris' thing about proportional representation, I'd like to say that contrary to Latin America, there are also other examples. And one good example, which is closer to Greece, is Spain. And in the case of Spain, whenever, after Franco, the government had to form a coalition with the Catalan party, as was, then the country was relatively free of corruption. I say relatively free of corruption, and ministerial appointments were far more made on the basis of competence and so on. Whenever there was
speak into the microphone a little bit more.
Whenever the case was that autonomous governments were formed, the whole thing went downhill, with corruption taking over instead of, and in fact, I suggest that Latin America is not the best example for transparency and so on.
So let's make a new round and be brief. We have just 15 minutes.
I'd like to start with the points that Dimitris made, because I think that they're important. I'm not sure that, or at least we should think of how we compare transition in Central and East European countries and what's happening now in Greece. There's definitely a type of transition, and it's a type of transition which is forced by a crisis and by external pressures of the economic type. But the different types of transitions that we're used to discussing are the ones that go from a totalitarian or an authoritarian system to democracy. And in these countries, there was a general consensus that the old status quo was to get away with and completely do away with, and then have a new situation. Now that was particularly important and also relevant to the fact that they agreed to have proportional representation, because there were voices that had to appear there, and it appeared to be much more democratic. But in our case, transition is something very different, and you do not have this kind of the rejection of the previous status quo. I know that everybody says here that they don't like the status quo, but it is exactly because, and you mentioned it, because it's the state machine doesn't pay anymore. The European Union doesn't pay anymore. So there was, people were happy before. There was a consumerist mentality that, kept them happy. Now this is the problem, that you don't have it. And so that's what I'm saying. This is a much more complicated type of transition. And by having proportional representation, I'm not exactly, if you don't have the culture of cooperation, which you don't, and you have it in the UK, for instance, that's why they have a coalition government. If you don't have the culture of cooperation there, I cannot see how this country, simply by getting into parliament or by giving them the chance to get into parliament, you can have them to cooperate in terms of government.
First of all, the presidential system the world over is a failed system, with the exception of America, the United States of America. This is the literature. If anybody who does comparative politics and opens Latin America does not provide a successful model, and nobody is talking about the presidential system in the Greek case or in the European context in general, right? But anyway, this is a theoretical discussion that we can have. Now let's go back to our parliamentary system. And the Greek parliamentary system is very peculiar because it was described yesterday. It has no institutional counterweight, as we say, θεσμικά αντίπαρα, to the power of prime minister, and it was abused the 30 years we've been through. Proportional representation is the system of election all over Europe. All over Europe. Scandinavia, Spain, even Germany, with a high 5% minimum, but then proportional representation. And so no party can have one party government, even in Germany. Even if the CDU gets 40%, 42%, 45%, it still needs to cooperate with someone. So all over Europe, it's not something, it's only here that is a taboo. Three, I wouldn't suggest the change of system had it not been for the explosive situation that we are faced with today. With my fear that soon enough the Greek parliament will become irrelevant, with or without elections, if elections continue to be based on this very closed shop. We have a closed shop, oligopoly, a market, a political market that has been cornered by monopolies to exploit and blackmail the Greek people against their will. And so the Greek people either will not go vote, like 1 million people abstaining, and maybe 2 at some point, thus rendering the whole process less and less legitimate. And if they vote, they will be blackmailed into voting for one government of the right or the left, and we keep on having, I mean, don't you see that the system is falling apart? One of the constants of metapolitics is that we have 2-term governments has gone away since 2009. Suddenly we have elections every 2 years. Soon we will have elections every year. Soon the parliament will not be able, in the elusive quest to find 151, soon the whole process will become irrelevant, explosive, and very dangerous. And so faced with this crisis, and only because of this transition, one can talk about what type of a transition forever, and and it's obviously a parallel. Obviously we are different from Bulgaria, and no country is similar to another country. Every country has its own, and Bulgaria was different from Romania, and Romania was different from Poland or the Czech Republic, for sure, already within the communist context, let alone Greece. But we are faced with a total collapse. The status quo is and will be even more discredited the more ekatharistika are coming, the more my salary suddenly November 1st. November 1st, my colleagues at the university realized what this polynomial schedule is about. Until November 1st, it was a theoretical exercise. Suddenly my salary is down 30% from October, 30%, and so suddenly it is becoming real. And it will become even more real as the 2012 is happening. So when we talk, and I want to invite you, okay, you don't like my proposal, fine. But when we talk about refreshing the political system, bringing these high school students into the political process, having more of Boudarisis type of fresh faces, making the parliament relevant again, I want to ask you, what is your counter proposal? If not a concrete proposal, at least I stake my neck out and invite all the attacks. So I have a concrete proposal. What do you have? Because by simply saying, oh, let's have a coalition government, doesn't mean that it will happen. By simply saying, oh, we want fresh faces and new blood in politics, doesn't mean that it will happen. Wishing something doesn't make for policy. Policy is concrete, certain proposal. When George Floridis comes in on the scene and suggests with his intellectual friends of, oh, let's do a new politics, unless he is concrete, unless he has an institutional, right away implementable proposal, then it's fumara, again, one more of the same, τα λέμε μεταξύ μας. So I want you at this time of crisis, at this time of confusion, we are so confused now and the journalists have not helped, to be concrete, specific, and as rational and forward-looking as possible if we have a hope to exit that crisis.
So I'm going to answer your question very, very quickly. Greece has some similarities with Israel vis-a-vis the population. It's a Mediterranean country and it has huge tax rates. And it has a very big diaspora. There the similarities end. Israel created an innovation ecosystem because of its army. There were lots of spillover effects from the army. Effectively, the Greek army is creating civil servants. So, so this is not... in effect, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Israel started because of state intervention. They created a huge fund of funds called Yozma back in the 90s, and this funded the whole entrepreneurial system. All I'm saying is that Greece needs to reason from success stories. I'm not saying that it needs to copy them. You can't copy policies of other states, they will fail. You need to adapt them to this context or create new policies. But you need to know what others did. Now, vis-a-vis your question, what to do in Greece, I recently participated in a debate about whether young educated Greeks should stay in Greece or flee. I was on the stay side, but it was 6 months ago. So I think it all depends on who you are. An analogy that I like to use is that between the hedgehog and the fox. You know, the hedgehog is someone who knows one really good trick, the fox knows many tricks. So if you are really good at one thing and you can't find a job in Greece and you have a commitment towards that thing, you know, you're an astrophysicist, then you leave. No one can advocate something horizontally for everyone. But if you're a fox and if you're willing to risk, if you're willing to create your own firm, if you're willing to start your own NGO, if you're willing to play it all, the situation in Greece is going to change in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. At some point it does. And those who buy low in a stock are the ones who have the highest gains. So it's up to you. It depends on what you want to do.
I must admit at the moment Greece is the most exciting and sexy place in the world. Yes, to your concrete, you have, but I also want to give an answer. This concrete, this is not concrete to say you want a proportional representation. It is not concrete to say you want a coalition. Concrete is to say on what matters. Politics is what to do, not how to do. First tell us what to do, and then make the coalition. That's your point.
Well, concrete, you're right. It's just that by institutional changes, in a period of crisis, you're not going to get the outcome. Do you want concrete? You need funds to kick off development. The country is in such a deep recession, has many changes at the political level. It's the economic crisis that is producing political instability. It's not the other way around. So you have to deal with the economy. This is important.
If George Papandreou was imaginative enough, creative enough, and wiser, instead of this proposal of referendum that backfired totally, and we have seen the results this past week, he came out, that's my concrete, came out and suggested proportional representation. What would have happened? A, all the small parties will align with him and will vote it in parliament with 220 votes, with New Democracy only in the corner. B, will make the request of the opposition for early elections irrelevant, because the opposition would know that it will not have a one-party rule. After the elections, no matter when they happen, they will not have the 50%, right? It will force them to cooperate now instead of later. Now, on what to cooperate, I want to be very clear. Because Greek politics, suddenly the whole Greek politics is becoming irrelevant, as we've seen with Sarkozy and Merkel. Right? We are at the mercy of our creditors. And we will remain at the mercy of our creditors for the next 3-4 years. What needs to be done is very specifically, concretely, as never before, written out in the New Deal. 1, 2, 3 points, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the Greek political class does not want to be specific and concrete because it hates, it lives, it thrives in being vague and elusive. And so we know the roadmap is there. What needs to change in this country, reduce the public sector, liberate the Greek economy, making it more entrepreneurial and competitive. Until now, Greece did not need to be competitive. It could exist on loans and transfer from shipping and tourism. Suddenly we have to be competitive. Suddenly we have to produce services and goods that other people, this is the surprising thing, other people will want to buy. This is very difficult, to make something that others want to buy. Germans, Italians, Turks.
Not olive oil.
And not just olive oil is enough. It's not enough. And it's only €2 a kilo these days, so it cannot provide a solution. So how do we change and transform our whole system, the education that produced public servants? Greek degrees were for public sector employment only, or mostly. Suddenly we need to produce graduates that will be competitive in international market, and you, this generation, more or less, not the IB, is totally useless when compared with the Turkish equivalent. The Turks are producing a new, very competitive elite, English-speaking, international, cosmopolitan, and ready to swallow us in 1 second. And we keep on having this public university, you know, the venerable institution, etc., etc. But here we are in ACT, and so we are in the competitive private forward-looking sector.
Come on. So, I think it was enough. It was really very interesting and not violent enough. I was disappointed. Thank you very much.